a somewhat niche model, but it's nice to see it appear in model form nonetheless. Hi there everyone, I hope I find you really well this morning, and today we've got a locomotive box opening and review. And this is a Bachmann product. It's a class of locomotives that I didn't have any of before, and I've been really keen to take a look. But before we go on, I'd just like to bring your attention to today's channel sponsor, who are Trainomatic. They make DCC decoders and other accessories. These are designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. And you can find links down below to the Trainomatic website and also their UK stockists, Tram Fabrique, as well. But without further ado, come with me and let's take a look at this Bachmann locomotive. Here we have it. It's the Bachmann Class 43. Now, I picked this up from Rails of Sheffield, but if you're looking for an affiliate link down in the description box, I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed because right after I bought this, they sold out. So quite literally, I think I've got one of the last ones. But it is a golden opportunity to review this. When it was originally announced from Bachmann, I was kind of keen to pick one up. I already had the Class 42, so it was an interesting thing that they were tooling up for the outwardly quite similar Class 43, but for a whole variety of reasons I didn't end up getting one at the time. But when this came up in the Rails of Sheffield sale, I really couldn't say no. So we've got a catalogue number on the end there, 32-067A, Class 43 Warship D836 Powerful in BR Blue. And we can also see there as well that it's got a 21-pin DCC socket. Now, we're going to be doing a full how-to guide as part of this video to be able to show you exactly how you can DCC fit your own model, but more of that later. It's a pretty standard Bachmann box, so it comes out of here really easily. And it's just guarantee and instructions in there. So we're not going to dwell on the box because that's not what we bought this for. Why would anybody want to dwell on the box? But what is first apparent actually as we're going through this is it does come with these etched metal nameplates, and they're kind of on a silvery, maybe nickel or aluminium. I'm not really quite sure exactly what metal it's made from, but the actual etched plates there, we've got the name plate and also the North British Locomotive Works builders plates there, which you can apply if you so want to. I know quite a few people really like these etched plates, but the locomotive does actually come with tempo printed plates on, so actually it's not essential, but it's really nice to see that Bachmann have included that. And then there's also the detail bag, and this really struck me just how many potential bits and pieces there are for a user to fit if they so choose. And you might be looking at this and thinking, my God, that's an awful lot of stuff. But a lot of this is the buffer beam valances and pipework, which would necessitate removing the couplings. So actually for most people, just leave this bag be. But it's really nice to see that Bachmann have provided these. So for example, you could have one end of the locomotive done with the full valance and all the pipework, and just leave the coupling on the other end if you so choose. There is actually enough stuff in there to do both ends of the locomotive, so if it's going into a display cabinet, you can really make it look something special. This is a relatively newly tooled model from Bachmann, and don't let the shape and style fool you into thinking that this is a warmed over version of their Class 42. It certainly is not. This has been completely tooled from scratch, and it is actually quite commendable for Bachmann to have done this when they already had a Class 42 in the range. The Class 43, none of them survive to the present day. They were probably the more successful of North British Railways diesel engined products, but even so, they just did not last. Even saying that, only 2 Class 42s did as well. So they were victims of the 1970s purge of diesel hydraulic locomotives by British Rail. First impressions when we get it out of the box is actually there's a really good weight in these. It may only be a bow, but the amount of weight here, I've got every faith that the adhesion that this will show on the track and actually the electrical continuity will be really second to none. And it's something that actually the Bachmann 42 was always renowned as being a pretty faultless performer. So I've got every expectation that the Class 43 is going to be just as good. On the front face of the locomotive, Bachmann have captured that North British Railway version of the Warship really quite well. And it's quite a complex shape with all of this curve here. Every single part of this is curving in multiple directions, and it's great to see that Bachmann have really captured the look of the original prototype. This model doesn't seem to have sprung buffers, but I'll be honest with you, I always say about sprung buffers is that really for most applications they just add cost without really adding anything value for money. Those people who use 3-link couplings would beg to differ, but they are very much in a minority. You can see in there through the cab windows we've got the full cab interior going on there. Separately applied windscreen wipers, and then these handrails are actually all separately applied metal, and it is really nicely done. One potential detraction that I can see though is when I've got this out of the box, it is a brand new model, but these handrails are so fine that at some point before it's got to me, it has been bent slightly, probably at the factory when it's put together. But in all honesty, it is a minor detraction, and the real locomotives would have been subject to a few knocks and scrapes, so it's very conceivable that actually it just doesn't matter. I really do like as well these front head code boxes and the way that Bachmann have set these up with the glazing flushly done in the front and then the character head codes behind really does look nice. So it's just something that really has caught my eye. As far as buffer beam detail goes, you've got the packet that I showed earlier for all of the extra bits to add if you so desire. But actually there's a couple of bits already on there. But I'm going to leave this locomotive be because I quite like to be able to run it forwards and backwards pulling a train. So these tension lock couplings are something that I think is a must for me. If I turn the locomotive over, you can see that that slimline tension lock coupling is mounted into a NEM pocket that is pretty unobtrusive into the front of the bogies. So if you do want to add those valances, it's a really easy task to take that out. The pickups from this locomotive are from all 8 wheels, and it actually has drive to the same all 8 wheels. And Bachmann really have been the masters of the all-wheel drive. They were one of the first manufacturers to introduce that to their diesel fleet, and actually they haven't really put a foot wrong ever since then, so it has that usual standard that we've come to expect. The bogie sides on this are nicely done. The warships have a little bit of a slightly strange bogie setup where you see these inside frames on the wheels, so the front faces of the wheels are very important. And way back in the past when we did a review of the Bachmann Class 42, it was one of the things that I did compliment that on, was that they'd got the look of the dished look of the wheels just right. Somewhere in my collection, and I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to find this, I think I do actually have a photograph of a real warship's wheels, and I think, in my opinion, Bachmann have captured that look pretty well. We've also got the speedometer drive on there, which is really nicely done, and it's interesting to see, yeah, it is separate from the wheels, but these wheels actually, they have almost like a pointed bearing on the end that speedo drive fits over, so it will always stick around the centre, and actually that does make it reasonably durable, and I really actually quite like that attention to detail. And it does mean that there's 2 different types of wheels on this locomotive. There's 3 axles have just these flat faces, and the fourth axle has these pinpoints to take up the speedometer drive, and that is a really nice touch from Bachmann. Whilst I've got it upside down, you can also see that they've also got these little dip switches hidden away underneath, which allows you to turn the tail lights and the cab lights on and off. This is principally for DC running, so I'm going to leave them be because I'm going to be DCC fitting this, and then those functions are controlled through the decoder. That said, some people might like to turn the tail lights off because when the locomotive was pulling a train, it wouldn't actually be showing red lights to the rear. Only when it would be running light locomotive would it be showing those tail lights. In terms of the rest of the locomotive, the body side is nicely done. The prototype did come across as being somewhat slab-sided, and actually Bachmann have captured that well, but in a way that doesn't really make it look like a model. And it's something that whenever you look at some older models, they can really fall foul on this. The one in particular that I'm thinking of is the really old Hornby 00 Class 28, which really just something wasn't quite right with the look of the body sides. Bachmann have avoided that pitfall and actually got the look of this locomotive just right. The tumble home at the top is nicely done, and again they've managed to capture those characteristic curves just right. The vents on this, they're not separately applied, but they are nicely done nonetheless, and we get that representation of the louvres really, really nicely in there. The engine room glazing again is flush, just like the cabs, and I'm just looking in there. I'm just trying to see whether there's any representation of the inside of the engine room. I'm just looking at the other side as well, and it would appear that there is, and you can see the kind of silver bulk of what would have been in the engine room of the actual real locomotive. It may not actually be a separate detail part, but I think having the inside finished in that kind of machinery silvery colour actually does work really well, so that is another plus point for this model. Looking at the tempo printing, it is really sharp and clearly defined. And again, we've come to expect this from all of the major manufacturers, but Bachmann have not disappointed on this. I showed you the etched plates for the powerful name there, and also the North British Locomotive Company builder's plate. And if you so desire, you can put them on over the top. And I'll be honest with you, looking at the tempo printing, I think that that is really good. And it's a major plus point that Bachmann have gone above and beyond and provided etched nameplates as an addition. Other tempo printing, we've got the overhead electrical warning flashes all where they should be. We've also got TOP's data panel there, which I cannot read with my naked eye, and it'll be interesting to see just how much of that is legible under magnification. But even if it isn't, I'll be honest with you, if you can't see it with your naked eye, then really perhaps there's a lot of leeway to forgive a little bit of smudging there. The double arrow as well is really nice and sharp and crisp. It's in the right places for these locomotives. These locomotives, whilst they were classified as TOPS Class 43, never lasted long enough to carry TOPS numbers, which for somebody like me who loves TOPS numbers, it really appeals to their OCD, is a little bit of a shame. But what it does carry is the D number, D836, which it would have carried pretty much to the end, although later on some of the locomotive examples would have had the D removed and just had the 3-digit number. The handrails on there, I'm just looking there, it's difficult to tell whether they're separate metal or just painted on. And my inclination is that they may well be just tempo printed. But actually the fact that I can't tell the difference probably means that Bachmann have scored a bit of a good goal here, in that it keeps the costs down by removing the need for somebody to fit separate metal handrails. And if it looks right, to be honest, it is right. So kudos to Bachmann for that. If we turn to the roof, we can see we've got these lovely separate etched grates, and I'm looking down in there. It does appear that there is a fan behind both, but it's quite difficult to see, but it's completely in keeping with how the prototype would have looked when looking down on it, and that is a really nice touch. The rest of the roof detailing as well is nicely done, and this is where you can start to see the differences between the Class 42 and this, the Class 43, to realise that yes, Bachmann have completely tooled up for the different class of locomotive. Overall, the package is really nice. There are a couple of different touches which do remind me an awful lot of the Class 42 model, which is quite old, such as the buffers which aren't sprung. And it does make me wonder whether some aspects of this Bachmann have tried to keep the costs down. But that said, for me, sprung buffers are not a deal clincher, and there's a lot of other points, such as this speedo drive down here and the capture of the look of the front of this model, that really do make it stand out. We're up here in the Loftwood Weir Yard, and we're going to do a DCC fitting of this Class 43 from Bachmann. So first up, let's take a look at what we've got here. And courtesy of today's sponsor, we've got a Train-O-Matic 21-pin decoder, and that's what we're going to be fitting in. So we've got our locomotive here, and the only tool that we're really going to need is pretty much a small crosshead screwdriver. And a little bit later on, it might just be helpful to have a larger flathead just to help lever out the blanking plate. So underneath, we've got screw hole here and ditto over here. It is a little bit of a restricted fit, so just make sure that you're down onto the screw head, and hopefully, now I can see instantly, be really careful when you do this because the cab lights are connected by these very, very fine wires. So you just need to be ever so careful. And we can also see this, I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I think it's something to do with the speaker. It has this grill built in to the roof. So I'm going to leave those be for now, but that's a bit peculiar there. I suspect that, yeah, they just make contact with these here, which is actually quite a nice design. This is the blanking plate. So with a flathead screwdriver, just going to very carefully lever up one side, then lever up the other side. And just work it out. You don't want to lever it all from one side because you run the risk of bending the pins out of shape. And if you do that, you will have great difficulty getting the DCC decoder into place. Now, I've chosen a Train-O-Matic 21-pin chip, and you can add to these a smart power pack, but I've decided on this model it doesn't really need it. The Bachmann models are heavier enough and have enough of an electrical continuity that I don't think it would benefit from that. So I'm just going to put the pin in, make sure it's down snugly, and then it's simply a case of adding back in the top of the locomotive, down and flat, and then we've got those two screws to go back in using the crosshead screwdriver. Don't over tighten them because you'll strip the thread. And there we have it. Our locomotive is DCC fitted. It's easy as that. So, to the all-important scores for this model. First up is finish. And actually, it is quite pleasingly applied. The rail blue is something that Bachmann do exceptionally well, be it on a Class 24, 25, 20, 40, 44, or the rest of them. They really do get that shade just right. However, there's a couple of areas that for me just felt like something not quite right. The buffer beam area for me, those buffers look a little bit chunky and plasticky. I'm not bothered about them not being sprung, but the buffer heads are quite thick and are clearly plastic rather than turned metal that we've seen on other locomotives, and it just kind of doesn't quite feel like a locomotive that has so recently been tooled up. As for other things, well, the tempo printing is nice and crisp, and the demarcation between the yellow and the blue on the front warning panels is nicely done. So for finish, I'm going to give this an 8.7 out of 10. Functionality. This model worked perfectly. The motor and drivetrain that Bachmann use is faultless, and I found that it could be controlled even down to quite a good crawl, and it was very sure-footed. It didn't tend to lose grip, and it didn't tend to lose electrical continuity. So overall, I was very, very pleased with the package that Bachmann have put together. So for functionality, I'm going to give it a 9.5 out of 10. Ease of use. Now, in the main, for me, this really boils down on locomotives to things such as, do they have you covered with different livery variants, and also how easy are they to DCC fit and DCC sound fit. Well, being a modern tooled model, Bachmann have covered the different livery applications that the real ones carried. At the moment, well, I've bought up the very last one pretty much from Rails of Sheffield, and I've had a look around and I'm struggling to find anywhere else that has them in stock. So we're not really able to at this time recommend a retailer where you can buy your own, but it's certainly one to look out for. So ease of use, you can get it in the rail green, the maroon and the blue, and DCC fitting was as easy as you've come to expect. These diesel locomotives are really easy to get into and to get that chip out. So I'm going to give this a 9.5 out of 10. Aesthetics. Well, for me, I thought that actually Bachmann have captured the look of this North British example, especially the face, really, really well. We've also got the detail on that roof, which is nicely done. And bear in mind that that's what you're going to be looking at an awful lot. It is important that that is done right. The cab windows as well, I really do like these with the flush glazing and the silver surrounds. Letting you see the inside of that cab is really, really good. The tampo printing of the nameplates as well I thought was particularly good, and actually the fact that they've supplied extra etched nameplates was just a good plus point there. They didn't have to, but they have. So for aesthetics, I'm going to give this a 9.6 out of 10. Then we come to value for money. Well, at the moment, when I picked this up on sale, I paid £84.50, which I thought was a really favourable price. That said, the RRP is somewhat more significant, and when we see this reappear in the range, I think it's only going to get higher still, because that is the upward trend that we're seeing from pretty much all manufacturers, Bachmann included. So I'm going to base this on its actual RRP rather than the price that I've got it at the moment. And I do think that there are certain aspects of this that kind of hark more to the older ex-mainline Class 42 than a modern spec fully tooled up from scratch model. So for me, value for money, I'm going to give this an 8.8 out of 10. So that gives us a combined score of 46.1 out of 50. That is still a pretty respectable score. And I have to say that if you're into your hydraulics from the Western region, then this is an absolute must. It does hold its own against any other model in the range. But if you're somebody who's more of a casual collector of hydraulics and may be happy with just one example, I would suggest actually just stick with the Class 42. It's not that this model is inferior in any way, it's just that there's an awful lot of Class 42s available on the second-hand market, and it is a fine model. So, a somewhat niche model, but it's nice to see it appear in model form nonetheless. Well, I hope that video has been really informative to you. Don't forget to like this video and share it too, and also subscribe to the channel, and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they come up. And also, if you want to get hold of one of the decoders that we used in the DCC Fitting guide, then you can follow the links down below, and that takes you to the sponsor of today's video, Train-O-Matic. But until next time, you take really good care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you again. You take care. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Train-O-Matic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, but a special thanks go out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Tepic, Michael Lockie, and Helen Sink. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.